Ladies and gentlemen, you know about Bret Weinstein, and you've probably heard of the Evergreen scandal. Well, I'm watching a video right now called Bret Weinstein, Evergreen Project, Veritas, and Censorship with Benjamin Boyce. There is a slightly misplaced comma in their title, in my opinion. Now, we're at 11 minutes and 22 seconds. I think I might need to go back a little bit. And we're going to hear what Bret has to say about the current subject. We're going to chew on it a bit. And I'm just going to say that Bret scares me a little bit. Do you want to see why Bret scares me a little bit?
Manipulate reality. Well, I think it is inevitable if you don't build some sort of protection into the system.
Back up a little more. Go back to 1030.
Platforms from selling the right to downregulate your competitors' content or your detractors' content. And I think that's where we are.
Well, we are there, and we just watched the Project Veritas video, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you about that is that if any one of us is given the power to shape the world, such as Google has the power to shape the world, to quote...
Okay, does Google have the power to shape the world? Now, off the top of my head, I can think of two instances in history where that accusation could be made. Pardon me. You could say it when the printing press was mechanized, right? It used to be a man pushing down a lever for every piece of paper that came out of the printing press. But eventually some man would press the lever to turn on a machine, which would then just print and print and print and print and print, right? So that got some people, people could get upset about that. If these guys were on the scene, they'd get upset. And they'd say, things have changed, right? It's one example. The other example I could think of is when radio came into existence. Hell, there's three examples. When radio came into existence, you throw your hands up and you say, they don't even have to print stuff anymore. They can send radio waves out in all directions from one central tower. And things have changed, and then TV comes along. And TV is this thing where it's not localized, it's national, it's so expensive that there's only a few TV. It used to be every single town had a newspaper. Now there's only 5 or 7 national TV because it's so expensive. Nobody has the money to do this equipment. It's cutting edge, brand new technology. So, therefore, everything's changed. And so there's always... Now, the fact that they were upset about this change in the 50s, they did the FDIC, or what is it? No, the FCC. What is it? FCC? What is the one that does over-communicate? Federal Communications Commission. They put that in place, and then we had riveted onto us, hammered onto us, for decades, state-sponsored or state-sanctioned, really, state-sanctioned media. It wasn't until the internet broke us out of it in the 1990s, and media started just blowing up and changing completely. And people now have lost all respect for media. And they behave, if you go back and look in the 1980s, the censoriousness of them and so on, they behave not... The internet broke out. We all broke out onto the internet for a damn reason. And it was because we had the government riveted onto us with state-sanctioned media outlets for decades in the United States of America. Now, so there's several examples when you could throw your hands up in the air and say, everything has changed. We have to throw out, our previous ideas because we're in a totally new situation, right? You can always say that based on new technology. It's always tempting. Okay.
Would it not be a sin to not try to shape the world for the better?
So, if you had the power to shape the world for the better, is it not sort of like your moral obligation? And therefore, if you find yourself in a seat someday with millions of dollars at your fingertip, aren't you sort of morally obligated to do what you can to improve the world? And he's saying, shouldn't Google then not really be held... how much do we blame them? Like, maybe we should just view this as the inevitable result of somebody having gargantuan power, like Google. Now, if we can view it as the inevitable result of gargantuan power, then we can just make it illegal to get gargantuan power. Voila, antitrust laws. Now, That's poisonous thinking. So let's go through and let him continue.
Not something that is inevitable, that somebody given this much power is going to want to manipulate reality or perception in order to manipulate reality.
Well, I think it is inevitable if you don't build some sort of protection into the system.
Thank you, Bret. Good job. Fantastic. Thumbs up. It's inevitable if you don't build some sort of protection into the system. Now, we have freedom of speech. That's the important thing. Bret's going to talk about that a little bit. Good job. We're on the right track. Everything's fine right now.
And one of the things that I find very surprising about the present moment is that lots of people are losing touch with why we have counterintuitive rights like the right to free speech.
Yeah, people are saying, nobody wants to hear from Nazis, let's just make Nazis illegal. Like, we all agree on that. Like, why can't we just make Nazi speech illegal? Because the Founding Fathers knew about this, says Bret Weinstein right here. He's correct about this.
After all, we should all be able to agree that certain things that people say are just terrible, and it would be great if nobody ever said them again, right? We don't need more Nazi garbage. But there is a reason that the Constitution itself says actually even that is protected. And the reason it is protected is because there is no way to draw the line that protects heterodox speech and bars truly obnoxious speech. And because we can't draw that line surgically, the value of heterodox speech is so great, and the founders were so clear on its importance, that they put in a protection against governmental interference with such speech. Now, unfortunately, the founders did not see the present moment.
So he's falling for it. He's falling for the old gag that everything's changed and now we have to use physical force. Up till now, freedom was okay. But now we have to use physical force. Now, it's so unfortunate that we're having this discussion about using antitrust against Google and Facebook, because here's the other option. If we didn't have antitrust laws in our pocket, and we were also committed to not making antitrust laws, if we were in Mr. Cropper's constitutional world where antitrust laws were then we would have to sit here and watch Google do what it's doing. And the public would have to get so incensed that it would do something about it. Now you say the public is so incensed that it is doing something about it. Yes, it's using men with guns to go in and solve the problem. No, I mean the public itself would do something. Like they would stop using Google. Like they would, like Google's stock would tank. Like it would become a pariah in polite society. Like the stock of all of the major media companies would tank. Now, right now, it can't reach like a fevered pitch of hatred against Google and the leftards because they are riveted on society through so many channels. The only channel we have to fight them is through the government. We have antitrust laws. It's the only thing we can do is use the antitrust laws. If all that was swept away, society would have to be more mature about this, and people would have to figure out a way for themselves how to deal with this problem. And the mass of people in society figuring out how to deal with this problem would compute the problem. Now, we did this with the press, when we all ran to the internet and left major media behind, and they had to scramble and try to figure out, the New York Times was sold for $1 and all this stuff, and all these newspapers. Used to be 3 newspapers a week were going broke. Now they're all gone. All the newspapers are gone because we were done with the junk and we went to the internet to find our own news. So something will be done by the people to solve it. And if you say, yes, what the people are going to do is get men with guns to go solve it, you see, you're not going to be any better off. And it's going to be the leftists who end up doing the solution. And it's going to be the leftists who end up running the machinery after we all leave. Because people on the right, if we divide it as the left want to control people and the right want freedom, then after the machinery's set up, the people who want freedom will say, ooh, job done, and we'll go off on our merry way. And the left will say, hey, now we have the machinery in place. to control Facebook and Google. And that's what they want. They want nothing more than to be able to control Facebook and Google. The left. So beware of this, Bret. Beware of this. This is not safe.
I mean, these were people who never saw a bicycle, they never saw a chainsaw, a train. They didn't have any idea what world we would be living in. They would have no way of imagining an entity like Google that sat as an interface, a literal interface.
They did not have any way of imagining Google, and that's why it is important that we remember the principles in the First Amendment, in the Bill of Rights, in the Constitution at large. Because they could not imagine the things that were coming in the future. They have set down principles for us to be guided by. The principles of freedom and the ability to think for yourself and act for yourself. Now, if you say, well, they couldn't think of Google, therefore we're going to throw out their whole project, that's just utterly, utterly frightening. Very scary. It's insane.
Between human beings at a mechanistic level, that something that has some kind of crude intelligence could be making decisions about what I am able to say and who gets to hear it and how likely they are to encounter it. The founders would never have seen that coming, and because they didn't properly fear private interference with speech. So the First Amendment.
So they would have properly feared private interference of speech if they foresaw Google. So private interference of speech is a problem that is insurmountable, according to that, if I follow correctly. Do I, Bret? It's an insurmountable problem, then. So we're going to have to use government force, then, you say. Now, see, if we didn't have government force available to us, maybe he could put his brain to work on something else, like how can we defeat Google or change our culture? How do we do this? Like, you could start thinking of ways to do it and what to do, but right now you're just trapped in the call the men with the guns, send them down there. I don't like what those guys are doing. Send the men with the guns. I'm going to throw out the Founding Fathers' basic assumptions and principles, and we're going to get the men with the guns.
It's just what I said to Congress is it's inadequate to protect the right that the founders were attempting to protect, which is the free exchange of ideas.
So we can still freely exchange ideas. Even if Google is doing its naughtiness, we can still freely exchange ideas. It hasn't made a law against it. Now they make it difficult, and a lot of us that were making money have been demonetized, and it's upsetting a lot of people, and you can't even find my videos if you search for them by title. Some of my videos you can't find if you search for them by title. And I have to go into my edit page and look down through my thing to make sure they're even still on my YouTube thing. So it's a travesty what they're doing. But it doesn't mean that we can't freely communicate ideas. And if it gets really bad, then we should do something. Are you telling me, Bret Weinstein, that there's not a millionaire or a billionaire anywhere in the United States that thinks that this is an important problem that he could actually make money on by solving? Really? No millionaires or billionaires are even willing to think about making the money that could be made by solving this problem. Maybe that's the case, but I think if we got the men with guns out of the picture, and our only hope was people with millions or billions of dollars who wanted to invest, or a group of people who could get a corporation together and get the money, then we would have to go look down that road. And that's a road that you're not even willing to consider right now, because you just are preempted by the idea of men with guns going and solving the problem for us.
Are you advocating that the government expand its reach in order to give more liberty, like control, like take more liberty in order to...
As a liberal, there's nothing I like better than governmental control. The more of it that we have, the happier I am, is basically where that falls out. Now, look, I've said many times that the problem with much liberal thought is that it underrates the danger of solution making. And that as you make solutions, you are always inviting unintended consequences, and that liberals have a blind spot about those things. So, believe me, I have lots of fear about what happens if we attempt to regulate our way out of this puzzle. We could make things worse. And so, I also believe we need to recognize that we are generally Because across the board, we are in novel circumstances where
You are going to make things worse if you keep saying garbage like that. We are not in novel circumstances. We are in the same position that they were in 1790. We need freedom, and we need the government to stay the hell out of our lives. Okay? We are not in novel circumstances. This is why Bret scares me. This is why Bret scares me very, very much. Novel circumstances means we need to change the way we're doing things, throw out the old system that's not working, and find out something that can work today in our circumstances. This is like junky, pragmatic thinking. Bret, defend yourself. Can you defend yourself, please?